Here we go. Sam Tondreau. I'm here from the Mohegan Tribe. I am presenting today the first part of this virtual series, and I titled it Indigenous Studies Through a Mohegan Lens. I am Mohegan. I am here representing the Mohegan Tribe. And if you have been a part of my sessions before or have not, welcome. Cha ni tompak. Hello, my friends. I have added a little extra in here because I knew that I would be seeing some of your faces again. So I wanted to give you even more resources this time. Okay, this is just an hour glimpse though, so there's more coming. Okay, so this is me. I'm a former fourth grade classroom teacher. I also taught kindergarten for one magical year and then jumped back to fourth grade. And then this position opened up. I'm director of curriculum and instruction at the Mohegan Tribe. So I am constantly working on creating lessons and units of study. We'll talk about the CSDE mandate in a little bit and how I can help you meet that mandate and access resources. But my role is providing resources for teachers across the state of Connecticut, and all of my programming is free of charge. So I'm here as a resource. I am extremely busy, but I make all of my time available. We, in my department, are now a department of 3. A year and a half ago, it was just me. So we're growing to meet the needs. Okay. This is a virtual space. So just a couple things. I'm so happy to see 5 faces up here because it gives me someone to talk to and someone to engage with. If you're able to, I would love for you to put your camera on. If not, I completely understand. It's the end of the day. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking, just because we have extra background noise and such. I also want to keep the conversation going with the chat. We may not always be able to speak out loud with a microphone, but the chat is always there for us. So through this entire session, if any questions come to mind for you as I'm teaching, just throw it in the chat. JHD will help me at the end, and we'll compile all of the questions. I think I am echoing now. We'll compile all of those questions and I'll answer as many as I can in the time allotted. You can raise your hand in here. You can use the emoji features. Okay. So virtual space, here we go. Our vision for today, I want to create a comfortable learning environment. I want collaboration. I'm going to be sharing background knowledge about the Mohegan Tribe, past and present, because we're still here today. And I'm going to provide you with suggestions for Indigenous topics to bring into your curriculum right now. I see I have various grade levels in here for those of you that wrote in the chat or updated your grade level, and I have something for everybody here to get you started. So in the chat, some of you already started, but what do you prefer to be called? What is your role in education? And I always like to answer this really important question to me. Are there other Indigenous nations represented here today? And if you would like to share that in the chat, I would love that. I love making those connections. I am Mohegan and Nipmuc. Katap Tom Tamawimu to my Mohegan ancestors. Thank you to all of them, and that's in the Mohegan Pequot language. Without them, I wouldn't be presenting my culture and my heritage with you today. Without oral tradition and storytelling, a lot of our history may have been lost, and that's one of the most important things that we'll be learning about today. Oral tradition, storytelling, how to implement it into your classroom. And that goes K to 12. This is a teaching tool for you. It's a stop and jot. So if you have a little Post-it, a little KWL chart. So I'll pause for a moment. In the K, what do you know about the Mohegan Tribe? Okay, check your background knowledge. W, what do you want to learn? We may not get to everything today, but hopefully you can pose those questions with me later or another time. Make some goals for yourself. And thank you for those still adding in the chat. And then that third column, L, what have you learned? So as you learn through this hour, you can add some new learning to your list. The need for change. So the what and the why. And we're going to do a little chat here. So I have two statistics here for you. These statistics were gathered from the Indigenous Future Survey in 2020. In this survey was a multi-led Native project, and it was to compile Native research from Native people through Native people. And 6,400 Native peoples were involved in collecting the information. In 2023, right now, there's a new Indigenous Future Survey happening, which I just participated in the other day. So I'm looking forward to that data that's coming through. But I have 2 points here for you. And you're going to pick one or two. Okay. And I want you to read it and think to yourself, how does this connect to your experiences in schools? And how can we change these statistics? And in the chat, make a goal. Which one can you focus on this year, one or two? So the first one being 87% of state level history standards fail to cover Native people history in a post 1900 context. So that paints Native people in the past, right? And the second one, people often express disappointment or anger that what they were taught was so sparse or misleading. And I can speak to both of these from my public school education. I did grow up in Connecticut, and a lot of what I learned as a child was misleading. Some of my teachers, whatever their resources were or whatever they had access to or their background knowledge, we danced around some of the topics. And it created a nice light history, but a lot of challenging things happened. Would anybody like to chat out loud about one of these? Can you relate, or do you have a connection to one of these yourself? And I would love for you to be brave and speak out because it just makes it more engaging.
I can't take the quiet, Sam.
Yeah, go ahead. I have great teacher wait time.
Your wait time is phenomenal. So I think for me, a great place to start in my role is probably going to be focusing on number two. I just think thinking about bringing in resources and helping grow teacher capacity so that they are more confident and have some of the things that they need so that we are not a part of that statistic moving forward, and that, we start taking steps in the right direction.
Certainly. Thank you for sharing that. Providing resources, compiling things for teachers, helping them have a well-rounded toolkit, per se, right, to teach Native American studies in the classroom. That's our goal. And it is my hope to get us there. Okay. So this school year, 23 to 24, Connecticut public schools are mandated to include certain aspects into their curriculum, and one of those being Native American studies. Connecticut State Department of Education is doing a great job in working on creating resources for you with the 5 tribes, which is awesome. It's been a great project to be on. Resources will be on Go Open. And you also have an option when you're in limbo too, to use public or private materials and resources. So the content that I give you today, we have an online portal called the Educators Project. You can start digging into and using for resources in the classroom. A K-8 social studies model curriculum is being created, and a 9 through 12 bank of resources is being created. And as most of you know, new social studies frameworks were just approved.
I'm muted, but
Elizabeth, I do hear you over there. Just a heads up.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. And then collaboration of the 5 recognized tribes. So this is us, a bunch of us working together since last November. So it's been a year since we started working together. And what we're trying to provide for teachers across the state are 3 things and more. One of which being each of the 5 tribes has created a narrative about their history for you. You'll have access to the Mohegans document today. And the other ones will be available online soon when CSDE gets it up and running. We're also working on a narrative for you of who are the Eastern Woodland peoples, because that's what you're going to be required to teach. We're also going to create Indigenous pedagogy for educators, clearing the gaps, clearing up misconceptions, and just these resources that I know as a teacher, teachers need. So it's in the works, and you're in a great place to get started. Okay, I have some tips to decolonize your classroom for you today. And I absolutely would love for people to chat about this out loud. But here are just some steps. When I come to schools and I do PD with teachers, I list 10 steps. So I narrowed it down a little bit today. So it was a little shorter. But step 1, connect with the roots of your community and land. Have your students ask questions about the land. Who was living on the land before your school was built? Before people settled and colonized on that land? When I show you another time a map of the state of Connecticut, you will see that the entire, what we now call a state, is covered in Native American land. And that's what it was hundreds of years ago. So there are Indigenous connections there. Practicing verb tense, because Native people are still here today. So if you're talking about Native American groups, just practice not talking about them only in the past. Of course, they had events or ceremonies or things that happened in the past, but still talk about what they're doing today, their contributions to society, including Native people into U.S. history. Vetting your sources, and I'll give you resources to do this. Books, websites, media, it's all so important to vet. And bringing current issues or events into your classroom. Bring in contemporary Native life into your classroom, and that can be K-12. I have so many resources for you. It may not be Mohegan, it may be other intertribal websites or things that I've vetted myself for celebrations as well as challenges, because we don't always want to be stuck in the challenges either. There are also celebrations in Native communities and great contributions today. Music, art, more hands-on engaging things. Okay. And my friend Darlene from the Scaticoke Tribal Nation shared this image with me, and I try and give it a little spotlight every time I present, because this is Indigenous in a nutshell. It does not matter the color of your skin. It is a heritage and a culture on the inside. So it's just a great visual to share that. Who can share out loud? Did one of these hit you? Would one of these be a great next step? Did you make a connection with any of these?
I think it would be, I like the part where you said that you want to discuss the celebrations. I think it's really important.
Thank you, Taylor.
We discuss history and stuff. Like, we're always talking about everything that went wrong, especially when it comes to Indigenous. It's like, it's a lot of like how they were victimized, and it can be portrayed as like almost kind of like a negative thing. Like, let's show that they were also strong and creative and artistic and things like that.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that even a little further. Okay. And that is one of my goals in creating resources with the state of Connecticut. We're not just focusing on the challenges and assimilating into society and losing our languages. And yes, all of those things happened, and we have to own that and we have to learn about it. But what are we doing today, and how are we reclaiming those languages? How are we celebrating today? There's so many great things and so many positive things to bring into the classroom. But what I truly need, and what our tribal nations truly need, is allies in the classroom, right? I can't be in every school every year, in every classroom every year, though I'll try. I'm here as a resource. So I'm here to help you educate yourself on things you may not know, or maybe you're just not an expert on yet. But I bet a lot of you have more background knowledge than you think. And you just want a little bit more confidence and more resources to help you get there. Please change the way you talk about Native communities as we're talking about it. And then seek out those Native voices. If you're teaching about a certain culture in a classroom, reach out to those people, or reach out to people to come into your classroom. Have books that are written by Native people. Really amplify those voices when you're teaching about those people. Okay, Indigenous identity. So I'm often asked by teachers, what words can I use in the classroom? And what is a tribe? So we'll go over those few things. So if I were to ask you, who are Native Americans? Or if a student asked you, who are Native Americans? What would you tell them? So I'm a Native American. What does that mean? You could go in the chat, you could go out loud, and totally look at the slide. Take it in for a moment.
I don't know if I can answer, but I actually just taught a little bit of this with my 8th grade U.S. history class, because we talk about the land bridge and how Native Americans were the first humans who were in this land. So that the word native is truly how you describe Native Americans. And we've been going about the modern way of how we describe Native Americans and what word choices we use.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've been wanting to find more resources on, and I've been looking, and that's something that this is like huge for me, because I wanted students to be respectful of everything, and especially teaching in Ledyard, I want them to be extremely respectful of the many tribes that we have, that our children are part of.
Yeah.
So that history of the land bridge and talking about them being native to the land, they are descendants of those people, and that's the important piece.
And all of your language, air high five. Really nice job.
Thank you very much.
You just use really important terms, words. So Native people are original to a land. And if I am Native American, I am not the first person or the first peoples to live on this land, but I am a descendant of the first people to live on this land. So really great job. In the classroom, I suggest using all of these words, teaching all of these terms, and the next 2 slides. And I'm always going to give you the answers. You don't have to write everything down, just, things that stick with you. But teaching all of these terms with definitions it's important, because if I said I'm Native American, I may accept that, but other Native peoples may not. Some of these terms have connotations. So that word America was not created when the first people were living on this land, right? So that connotation can be challenging for some people, and some people may not identify through that term, but they may identify through Indigenous or Native, original to a land. The term Indian is used in so many government policies, in government pieces of paper, that if we did not have those policies or pieces of paper, we would lose a lot of recognition and a lot of rights. And I am not giving that word away, right? There's a lot of learning that comes with these terms, but the best practice of all, yes, Jennifer, thank you in the chat. The best practice of all is to use the name of the specific tribe or the specific Native nation. So if you are teaching in your classroom about a specific tribe, use that tribe's name. So Mohegan Tribe, Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation, Nipmuc, okay? And if you're unsure about what words to use, a good common practice would be go to their public website, make sure it's theirs, and notice how they write their language and what they prefer to be called. And I also challenge you with the goal of learning all year long, because students in your classroom do recognize if their culture or heritage is only taught one time of the year because it's Heritage Month or because certain holidays are coming up in the classroom. And as we add into our curriculum and integrate these topics, we can purposefully put topics in certain places. And when you start digging into the new standards and I start working more on the model curriculum, I can help everybody with that as well. So this next slide, it's using a resource through Native Americans in Philanthropy, and it digs into all of these terms. And here's like the full slide. It also goes into First Nations. So those are peoples of Canada, Native Hawaiian, Alaskan Native. So learning these specific terms with your students can help them use more appropriate terms in the classroom. Okay. And if you didn't know prior to this, there are 5 recognized tribes in Connecticut. So as you teach about Native American studies, these are 5 tribes that I suggest starting with because we're all creating resources. There are also other tribes or other peoples around the state. And I always put Connecticut in quotes because we were tribes before the space was named Connecticut. There are other lost Connecticut tribes that have been unable to gain recognition or that assimilated or went intertribal with other tribes. There are a lot of groups to learn about. So when you're digging into what land and who lived on the land of your school, you may not see these tribes, but you'll understand a little bit of the bigger picture. But first, I have the question of what makes a group of people a tribe? So on this slide, you see that there are 2 federally recognized tribes, Mashantucket and Mohegan. And to gain federal recognition, there is a list of things that you have to qualify for and pass. And that is in my resources. You'll gain that at the end. You'll also see too what Mohegan's path was to gain federal recognition. We also have 3 state recognized tribes: Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation, Golden Hill-Pagusset Tribal Nation, and Schaghticoke Tribal Nation. So if I told you that these groups of people are a tribe, there are 6 characteristics that make a tribe a tribe. What are those 6 characteristics? You can type in the chat. You can use your mic. I see language. Yes, that is one. Tribes have a shared language. Languages may have been lost, but tribes are working so hard to bring their languages back, reclaiming those languages. I see traditions, and I'm going to add to that a little bit. Cultural traits or spiritual traits would be that category. And I'm not going to say religion because it was not religion. It was a spiritual way of life. So far we have language and we have cultural, spiritual traits. 4 more. Yes, location. So a shared location or a shared place. And what's unique about our 5 recognized tribes is we're in a mostly central location that the land is very similar. Depending on if you're closer to the ocean or further away from the ocean, closer to water sources or further away, a lot of these tribes have a lot of similarities, but they also have a lot of differences, which is why we want to teach using the names of Native nations when we're learning about them. So location, language, cultural traits. And there's 2 more. So there has to be a little structure and a little order. So we have a government structure. Okay. Oh, that's a good one. I see size of the tribe. Size of the tribe does not make a tribe, but that does get into one of the categories of a bloodline or a family tree. There has to be a shared family tree or bloodline. Okay. And the one that's often the most challenging, because we don't think of it as much, is an economic system. So a way of living, a way of surviving. And of course, here are all of your answers. Okay. When this presentation is over, I will get all of your emails from JHD and I'll send everybody this presentation. So you'll have it. Okay. We'll dig into the Mohegan Tribe. This is a super short migration story and a little talk about our roots. To learn more, to learn deeper, you can go into that educators project that I'll give you access to, and you can learn more about this. But the little short summary, if you've heard of the Lenni Lenape before, the Delaware tribe, that is where we migrated and came from. So the Delaware tribe, the Lenni Lenape, divided into 3 clans: the turkeys, the turtles, and the wolves. And the wolf clan voyaged towards New York and beyond. And the reason for migration, needing resources. Okay. So they voyaged towards New York for hunting and better shell fishing. Sachem Uncas, and that is the first sachem, the first chief of the Mohegan Tribe, if you've heard of him before, he was a Pequot. Okay. And over 300 years ago, there were a lot of disagreements, and Sachem Uncas decided that he wanted to go his own way. And his followers and he founded the Mohegan Tribe, the Mohegan Nation. And he decided that he wanted one of those original clan names from the Lenni Lenape. And the name that he chose was the Wolf People, and that's Mohegan. Okay. So Mohegans were west of the Thames River, and Pequots resided east of the river. So on the next slide, I'll show you a map, and you will see why the river is so important to the land. Then settlers and colonizers came to the land. They wanted homes, farm, business. They wanted to take political and economic control. All right, so a little bit of a European takeover. Sachem Uncas formed an alliance with the English colonists. That was his political decision. And as he did that, he faced many challenging times, and survival was certainly threatened. But he always remained true to his Mohegan people. And because of that, we're still here today. So super short summary of where we came from. And this is a map of Mohegan Hill. Connecticut is an Aboriginal word, Quennetticut, and it means land of the Long Tidal River. It doesn't mean square, rectangle, right? And it wasn't named after a person. When you think about the land and you look at road signs, street signs, the names of rivers, the names of towns around our state, you will see a lot of those root words, a lot of those words came from tribal nations, came from Aboriginal peoples, and Quennetticut is one of them. So if I were to explain Connecticut to you, I would explain it to you because of the land, because of the resources, and because we have a long tidal river. So that's just one fun connection to learn about with your students. You'll see that the Thames River is on the side of the entire reservation of Mohegan and the other side of Pequot. The Thames River is a brackish river, so salt mixed with fresh, and there are a lot of habitats and estuaries in it. Okay. So as we talk about the connection to and the importance of our land, I'm going to provide you with our creation story. You can look at that later. And our creation story started on Grandfather Turtle's back. And if you zoom out on a map of North America, or if you've ever heard of other creation stories using Turtle Island before, that's Grandfather Turtle. And Grandfather Turtle is our timekeeper. So I have this little teaching tool here for you, right? The numbers aren't normally there. But on the inside of a turtle shell, there are 13 scutes. And if you go around the outside, there are 28 scutes. So my question for you and a question for students is, can you connect our timekeeper turtle to the natural world? So I just call Grandfather Turtle a timekeeper. That's clue number 1. And how can the turtle, why is it so important, and how can it connect to the natural world? $13 and $28. Do those numbers seem familiar?
For tonight, you're in the library. The food is in the library. Thank you.
Okay, if you think about moons, And I didn't know this until I was a grown-up, but there are 13 lunar moons in a year. And if you've heard of different names of moons in the news, on social media, the strawberry moon, the hunter moon, there's a falling leaves moon. These moons were named for a reason, and they connected to the natural world. And there are 13 moons. So there are 13 spaces in the middle of a turtle shell. Why are there 28 around the outside? So if you think of time, I see some thinking over there. Yep. If you're thinking of time and there are 13 moons in a year, there are 28 days in each of those moons. Okay. So Indigenous peoples already had a record of timekeeping. They had a way of understanding the natural world and listening to the world, the weather, and what was going on around them. And this is one way to help students visualize and connect to that natural world. And here's our 13 Mohegan moons. I am going to tell you a little teaching. Okay, and this teaching was written by Dr. Gladys Tanaquidgen. She was our Mohegan medicine woman. And she recorded something for all of these moons that your students, I have a resource right there. It says 13 moons resources, so you'll have all of these. But there's symbolism in the moons, oral tradition, and teachings. So this is the maple sugar moon teaching. As the flocks of geese return, the ice thaws, and the maple sugar runs. Maple was used as a sweetening agent and to make frames for dwellings, bowls, scoops, ladles, spoons, and stirring paddles. The inner bark was taken from the south side of the tree to make a cough remedy. When the geese flew north, the weather changed and the spring season came in. The geese flew low and were disorganized. It was an indication that a storm was near. When the geese flew high in a perfect V formation, fair weather would prevail. So I just gave you many facts about different Mohegan teachings in teaching you about the maple sugar moon. But are there things in that tiny blurb too that as a child or as an adult you've recognized as you've grown up? Have you ever seen a perfect V formation with geese before, or birds? Like, can you make that automatic connection? And by seeing these signs in nature, it would tell you things if you paid attention. So the maple sugar moon is the first moon in the year. And I read you that teaching for a reason, because the cycle of the year always starts with spring. And this is the first moon in spring. Why would the cycle of the year always start with spring? Yeah, I see in the chat, rebirth, the start of life, right? Things are growing, things are starting, things are beginning again. So as we talk about a new cycle or a new year, we're starting with that first moon in the spring. I like in the chat too, I see that people are predicting the weather based off of what they observe in nature. Spring is definitely a new beginning. So more connections to the natural world, connections to land. Can anybody in the chat or out loud speak to how can the teachings of these moons fit into your current curriculum or projects? Can you see any of these moons or any of these ideas just naturally fitting into projects? And I sometimes hear more from the elementary folks for this one. You can do a lot of hands-on projects, art, growing things. So talking about turtles, talking about moons, those hands-on activities. Okay, oral tradition. Storytelling remains a standing tradition in all tribal communities today. We all have this commonality. What's interesting is there are some stories, some oral traditions that are similar in our tribes, even in what we call these 5 Connecticut tribes, but some of them have different teachings in them, because teachings and lessons are put in stories for a reason. If I tell a story to you today, one of you may learn something different than another person, because whatever you learned is what you were ready to learn. It is what you were ready to hear. And different tribes may have different variations of stories for that reason. Also, what was passed down in their tribes. The goal in continuing our storytelling is to continue culture and preserve the past. And storytelling is a never-ending story circle. There are 4 parts to a story. You have to listen, you have to observe, you have to remember, and then if you do all of those, then you can share it, and that story continues. Okay, and talking about ELA, talking about classroom practices, there are so many central themes in a story. So stories could be used for many different things. Not going to be telling a specific story to you today, but you'll have resources from me to bring some of that into your classroom. Okay, more symbolism, more storytelling. Raise your hand if you've seen the tribal seal before of Mohegan or the flag. Wonderful, great. There's a lot of meaning in this flag. This flag is a modern representation of many symbols in Mohegan that are important and that tell our story as a tribe. So in the center, there is a sacred center circle, and that is where that spiritual life force is. Around that circle, there are 13 dots. What are those 13 dots representing? I see some lips over there. One of my secret powers is reading lips. It helped me in 4th grade. So the moons, yes, the moons, the back of the turtle shell, very good. There are 4 semicircle domes, and those point to the 4 sacred directions, north, east, southwest, right? They represent many things: the back of grandfather turtle shell, the sky dome, the shape of a wigwam, which is our dwelling. And there are also 4 sacred trees. The 2 on the top branch towards future generations, because we're always teaching our future generations. And the 2 to the bottom, just as I started today, I'm always thanking my ancestors and the roots of the people before me. So those 2 that are reaching to the ground, they reach towards roots. Okay. And Mundu Wigo, you'll see that in the flag. That means the creator is good. And that but is Fidelia Fielding's favorite saying. She was known as the last fluent speaker of the Mohegan language. But now that we're reclaiming it, I'm very happy to share not anymore. But she is very important in relearning our Mohegan language, and her saying is right on the flag. Okay. Mohegan is a sovereign nation. So middle school, high school teachers, if you're teaching about tribal sovereignty, if you're teaching about government structures, and if you want to compare and contrast the Mohegan Constitution with the U.S. Constitution, really dig into those rights of people. Mohegans are a nation within a nation. We independently determine our own fate, and we govern our own people and affairs. We have a court system, and we have a responsibility to provide for our people, to protect that independence of being a tribal nation. And you can access the court systems and learn more about those and access the Constitution right online. There's also great videos in here too to use in your classrooms. This is our government structure today. We have a Council of Elders on the top there. I work for the Council of Elders, and the Council of Elders are in charge of keeping our cultural integrity alive. So they are responsible for teaching our future generations and teaching those stories, oral tradition, and the culture. They have responsibilities to uphold the tribe's constitution, just like the tribal council does. The tribal council is more of the economic side of things. They are on the management board of Mohegan. And what's unique about both of these councils is that they are voted in members of society. So the Mohegan Tribe votes these people into office, or votes other people into office if they're best fits for those roles. Okay. We have current ceremonial leaders. You'll see on here Chief Lynn Malerba. And if you've heard about her in the news, she is our current U.S. Treasurer. So she represents us in U.S. government as well as our tribal government. We have a fire keeper, lodge keeper, pipe carrier, and you can learn more about those. We've had medicine people in the past. If you click on the more information here, when you get the slideshow, you can learn about those roles with your students. Okay. And we're going to do a couple activities. We only have 15 minutes left, but this is the fun stuff that you can do and you can bring in your classroom. Not that all of this hasn't been fun yet. Okay, so connecting that symbolism to your school. We talked about the flag and the tribal seal. So I have a challenge for you with your students to look at your school symbol or flag or mascot. It could be for your school, for your district, but hopefully you can see me and hear me over there. My entire computer just turned off and turned back on. And I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. Okay, so I just have to reshare my screen for you guys. But I want you to think about, and nothing like, teaching in the real world. I want you to think about the history of your symbol, the history of your school. Has your mascot changed over time? Has your symbol changed over time? And who chose that mascot or flag or symbol? And as I reshare my screen, can you see my slides on the screen? Okay, that's good. I know I have a banner up there, but we're going to go with it because I don't want to break anything again. So think about, what is the symbolism? Have things changed over time? And have those conversations with your students. We do have some hot topics out there with different school districts about mascot changes and what's appropriate. Talking about different cultures and what should be representing your school. And it does make for really engaging conversations and activism. Okay. I'm showing you these 3 images. And I'm showing you these 3 images for a reason. Okay. This is Emma Baker. She lived in the 1800s and the early 1900s. I'm a little biased because she is my relative. She's one of my ancestors. But those 2 images on the side, that building and that piece of land, they're the same plot of land. And this is an inquiry lesson that I created for students to talk about change in land over time and a little bit about what happened to land when colonizers and settlers came. So on the left, and this is just a little background knowledge, and you'll have this when you go to teach this with your students, but on the left, that was the Masonic Temple in Norwich, Connecticut. If you've heard about it before, or if you were ever there before, it was built in 1928, and it was built on top of a Mohegan burial ground. Okay, so there were 16 acres of graves of a burial ground. And after this building and other buildings were built, there was only 1/8 of an acre remaining of that burial ground. And this happened everywhere. People came, found great land, and wanted to build on it, right? So Emma Baker was walking one day with her mother, and they noticed burning bones and bodies in the ground before this building was built. And they went to Hartford and challenged this, but they couldn't stop the building from being built and the bodies from being excavated and burned. But eventually the Mohegan Tribe bought this property from the Masons and from Norwich for a lot of money, took the building down, instead put a monument there and tried to place people back because it was cultural grounds and cultural significance. So people losing their land, historical resiliency, really big topics. But in the end, if you go to visit this monument, you will see it's right across from NFA in Norwich. You will see that the 13 moons are represented there, the 4 directions. There's a lot of symbolism and learning. And it's right next to Uncas Leap Falls too, which is another historical site that students can go to visit with a story behind it. So that's a little into historic resiliency, talking about a person, talking about land, and students will have opportunities. So this is on the Educators Project, but they'll have opportunities of looking at primary resources, looking at photographs, reading articles from Indian country today, and forming their own inquiries to learn about different challenging topics like this. So I'd love to hear in the chat if you have any key takeaways, if there's anything. And this is a little more, higher elementary, middle school, maybe even high school level to use in the classroom. We are reclaiming our language. Kuwi Piamu. So welcome all. This sign is located at the Pottapah Golf Course, which is Mohegan's golf course. And our language department is working on reclaiming this language. It was and is a spoken and written language called the Mohegan Pequot language. And that is because both tribes come from the same original language. It is one language, and both tribes are actually working to reclaim this language. We're working on reclaiming our language through cultural classes with our membership and with our youth summer camps, because as we know, children learn languages a lot quicker and a lot easier than us adults. But the classes are here for tribal members to reclaim our language, and this came from our language department. We have to understand who we are, commit to moving forward while healing, right? We talked about that, learning through our homes and our communities, and addressing the negative aspects that we've had in our community. So, a task for you with your students. Can you look at those place names around your school? Can you think about what are those places, and do those names have connections to the land or the people from it? Right. I think as you start reading signs, you're going to start seeing things. Within my Google Drive folder that I'm going to share with you guys too, I do have a vocabulary list. It's a work in progress, but it's being worked on for different places and different counties of Connecticut where Aboriginal language and Indigenous language is used. So that could give you a little bit of a starting point. Okay. We need to vet our resources in the classroom. Where can we find accurate picture books, mentor texts, chapter books, websites, podcasts? Where can we find those things? And I'm asking you that open-ended because of course I'm going to give you resources, but I know that some of you in this room, because I have chatted with you before, have some of these resources. And this is a big quote. Stereotypical, biased, or inappropriate content can harm Native people, Native children, and can misinform all children. So if we're still giving those books that have been dusty on our shelves for 10 years and they have stereotypical messages in them, and in Reader's Workshop, we cannot read every book that's in our students' hands and understand exactly what's in them. We have to vet these sources before putting them in our book bins. So 2 resources for you here. There's a website, American Indians and Children's Literature. And it was created in 2006 by Debbie Reese. She's wonderful. She's brilliant. And I always go to her first when I'm vetting sources and I see what her Native opinion is. And she vets sources for you as a good start. I will also give you in the Google Drive folder, there's a book resource list. And there's a worksheet called Native 360 where you can go through a checklist and vet a book yourself, which would be a great grade level project to start going through and at least getting a small bucket of books on your shelf. But on her website, AICL, she has great lists of recommended books. She has read X book lists that say, do not use these books, and she'll tell you why. She also has a really great search bar. So you can search and you can look down. And I would say 85 to 90% of the books I've ever looked for are vetted on there. Good or bad? Here's a lot of good resource examples that I have for you that I do suggest you dig into. There's one in the middle called An Indigenous People's History of the United States, and that is a good mentor text for you. And it's a good reading source for adults to learn about where Indigenous people were in U.S. history. So it would be a great book study. It would be perfect for middle school, high school. And then I also have picture books and chapter books around. So we have to find those accurate tribe-specific representations of Native people, both past and present. Oh, yay, Angela. There's a bunch on Epic. Great, great. So look them up on those free virtual resources and use them in the classroom. I myself personally have 2 copies of all of these books now, just because when I go to schools, I want teachers to put them in their hand and see what they are before they use them. But great resources, and my book lists are still growing because the work is never done and there's always more to learn. Here's some extra resources for you because we're finishing up a little here. Ways to participate with Mohegan from here. So this is a 1-hour glimpse into Indigenous studies through a Mohegan lens. I am going to teach more on this virtual web series on different topics, but I would love for you to reach out to me so I can also come into your schools. I work with groups of teachers in professional development, and I can do, 1-hour virtual intro sessions, but I can also do 2 to 3 hour in-person sessions where we do way more activities that are grade level specific. I want to highlight, we have a Mohegan Challenge grant that is open right now through the end of December that teachers can apply for. And if they are accepted, they will receive $1,000 towards classroom supplies. They will receive a visit to the Tantaquidgeon Museum for their students and an outreach to your school. But outside of all of that, this slide that you're looking at, all of these services are free of charge. So if you set up a field trip to our museum, it's free to come, but unfortunately, you may just have to work out your bus, which I know can be challenging too. But if you apply for the grant would pay for the bus if you're accepted. Our outreach programming, when you schedule with us, we can come to your school for free to do an hour session with students. So it's an in-person outreach program. And then we have the Educators Project. That's a platform for teachers with lessons and units of study. I see a question. Are there children books specifically for the Mohegan Tribe? We have one children's book. It's called Makiawisa, Gift of the Little People. And it's actually on the Educators Project virtually. And there's a claymation that was made too that you can watch with your students. There are other texts that we have a few authors within our tribe, but they are chapter books. But for the higher level students, I do have those lists as well. Okay. Here are my suggested topics for K-12 just to get you started. And all of these things are either on the Educators Project, or I know it's probably small on your screen, but you'll have it. It's on the Educators. I see the eyes, I see the Educators Project. Sorry. The resources are either on the Educators Project or within the Google Drive folder that I give you. Okay. So next steps. You can scan this if you want, but you'll also get it. This is my Google Drive folder, and it is growing forever. Whenever I have a new master presentation, I upload it in there. I have a resources slideshow that's literally Hot Topics K-12, where I just dump all of my resources for you. So if you're teaching about blood quantum, or if you're teaching about Indian boarding schools, topics that aren't just specific to Mohegan, but are also intertribal topics, it will be found in there, and I'm always updating it.